I thought that I wanted to do something photographic, and I'd been looking at the river for a long time, and I managed to get some money from my mother. She gave me $100, and I went out and I started to photograph the river.
Well, we've actually done quite a bit in terms of cleaning up PCBs in the river in the last 10 years. The most important thing that we did was ban the use of PCBs. You can no longer discharge PCBs in the river.
Tonight, we'll find out about PCBs and how the DEC is trying to clean them all up. And we'll hear about the hot spots in the upper river areas where the PCBs are most prevalent. And we'll be at West Point once again, this time to find out about the photographs of a young woman who found herself ill one time and decided to recuperate by taking pictures of her favorite river. When we come back. Fran Dunwell is a busy person. As Hudson River Coordinator for the State Department of Environmental Conservation, she looks into new projects, takes care of PCB cleanups, fisheries management, land acquisition, and public access.
We have been trying to identify places in the Hudson where we could be developing new public access sites. Anybody that lives in the Hudson Valley and has been trying to use the river either for swimming, for launching a boat, for fishing, whatever, knows that there's really a big problem in the region finding places where you can actually get to the river safely. The railroad tracks cut off the river from the people, and particularly now with the new high-speed rail service, it's getting to be quite dangerous. There were two fatal accidents over in Dutchess County in the last year involving people crossing the tracks. So one of the things we're trying to do is identify new locations in the Hudson Valley where people can safely get across the railroad tracks to enjoy the river, either for swimming, for boating, or for other types of river enjoyment. The study that I brought along today is something that has been about 2 years in the making, and we have identified 22 locations on the river where new public access sites could be developed, some of them quite small.
The city of Kingston, with its Rondout Lighthouse under renovation, is on the list of public access priorities.
What we're looking at primarily in this study is boating access for the person who has a boat on a trailer that they want to launch into the river. Where can you pull up, launch your boat, and have space for parking? And that actually demands a fairly specific type of environment for the boater. You've got to have about 75-foot clearance to turn your boat around. You've got to have enough space for car and trailer parking. The parking has to be striped in such a way that a car with a boat trailer can park. And you need to have the right kind of slope to be able to put your boat into the river without going off the edge. Right. So there really are only a few places in the Hudson Valley where that's possible, and Kingston is one of them. I was just here last week talking to Jay Hogan, who's head of the Department of Public Works. And he and I were looking at possible locations in Kingston where you could put it in a boat ramp, and we are beginning some very serious discussions with the city right now to determine if there's a next step that we could pursue. The Department of Environmental Conservation right now is trying to work cooperatively with local governments, and in most cases what we're doing with public access development is we are trying to sort of strike a deal with the locality. One of the problems that you have as a state agency is finding the money to maintain a site once you've built it. Our office is in New Paltz. It's sometimes hard for us to be in Yonkers, in Kingston, in Catskill, to be there to maintain a site. So what we're trying to do is to develop a program where the department will pay some of the capital costs for development of access sites and have the locality agree to do the day-to-day maintenance of the site. And that's what we're going to be discussing with Kingston. I'm out on the river quite a bit. We have a research boat on the Hudson that does sampling, collections of young fish. Every two weeks we go out there and we're collecting samples of the young fish of the river. You have a net that you cast out behind the boat that's got a specific mesh size designed to catch the juveniles. And what we do is we count them. We try to get some sense of how many young striped bass, shad, and other important species of the river are hatched every year. So that program is actually run by our Hudson River unit, but I'm often out with them on the boat. I also have a canoe. I sometimes canoe on the river, which isn't probably the safest thing to do, but I do it. And I love to swim in the Hudson.
And just as most of the other concerned river buffs, Fran Dunwell is not about to try to eat any of the fish from the Hudson, but there are exceptions.
Well, there are certain fish out of the Hudson that I would eat. Shad, I do eat. I love the shad. I particularly like shad roe. And there are other fish that I'd like to eat that I don't. Striped bass you have to throw back. We've just adopted regulations that will allow people to fish for striped bass. It's actually a very popular sportsman's fish, game fish. But because of the health problems eating the striped bass, we require people to return them to the river once they've caught them. But the shad are safe to eat, and I personally eat quite a bit of shad during the spring spawning season.
And about those PCBs, what's the latest?
Well, we've actually done quite a bit in terms of cleaning up PCBs in the river in the last 10 years. The most important thing that we did was ban the use of PCBs. You can no longer discharge PCBs in the river, in the Hudson. And that in itself has led to a dramatic reduction in the amount of PCBs. But what people often don't understand is that PCBs are everywhere in the environment. They were used in refrigerators, in capacitors, the sort of box-like things that you see on power lines. Those were filled with PCBs, which was used by General Electric as an electric insulator. And it was, in fact, perfect for their use. I went to the GE plant up in Fort Edward about 10 years ago when they were just closing out the use of PCBs, and they were explaining to me what it was that made the chemical attractive to them and why it was going to be hard to find an alternative chemical to use once the ban went into effect. And they made a very convincing case. Unfortunately, PCBs are hazardous to health, and there was really no alternative but to ban the use of the chemical. But because PCBs are found everywhere, every street has PCBs somewhere, every dump that has an old refrigerator in it has PCBs. So when a capacitor breaks, when a refrigerator goes to the dump, often the PCBs leak out into the environment. So we're still finding that PCBs are coming into the Hudson River, and they're coming from all kinds of sources all over New York State and all over the country. The ban on the use of PCBs is just one of the things that the department has done. We also are cleaning up 7 highly contaminated landfills in the upper Hudson area, places where both municipalities and industry in the upper Hudson were disposing of their PCBs, and those were so highly contaminated and basically open to the environment. The chemical was just openly leaking into streams, and from the streams into the river. So we are now in the process of cleaning those up. We have 4 out of 7 that have been cleaned, and we now are about to clean up the rest. The main thing that we're doing is we are pursuing the necessary permits to dredge the Hudson River where the PCB hotspots are. The PCBs, about half of the PCB that's in the river is concentrated in about a 5-mile stretch of the river near Fort Edward. And that's because PCBs are they're a chemical that attaches to sediment. It doesn't like to just float freely in water, so it likes to attach to something. It usually attaches to sediment, falls to the bottom where the sediment is, and so when GE was releasing PCBs, it was actually settling out fairly close to their 2 manufacturing plants up in Fort Edward and Hudson Falls. So even though a great deal of time has passed, there are still very heavy concentrations of PCB in about a 5-mile stretch of the river. And within that 5 miles, we've also pinpointed what we call hotspots, places where the sediments tend to collect, bends in the river where the river water slows down, the sediments settle out with PCBs attached to them, and there are 40 hotspots that we've identified that are supersaturated with PCBs.
Improvements on the Hudson River are coming along with some help from the taxpayers.
I am one of the department's 2 representatives on the Hudson River Improvement Fund of the Hudson River Foundation. This is a foundation that was set up, the Improvement Fund was set up just a year ago as a result of the settlement of a case against Exxon. You may recall that a couple of years ago, Exxon was withdrawing water from the Hudson, and there was some concern about, first of all, the impact of the water withdrawals and also possible pollution of the river. So Exxon settled that case by giving $1.5 million to the state of New York. And we turned around and put that $1.5 million into an endowed fund within the Hudson River Foundation to be used exclusively for improvements to the Hudson to make it more accessible, more usable, more enjoyable for people who live here. So the Improvement Fund has a 7-member committee that makes grants. I'm one of the 7 members. And we have just recently given a grant to the Saugerties Lighthouse Conservancy for the restoration of the lighthouse. It's going to cost them about, I'd say about $35,000 to do the initial stabilization on the lighthouse, and we've given them a grant to do that.
Fran Dunwell is involved with the river going way back. It's not just because it's her job now.
I love the river. I've grown up with the river. I grew up in Poughkeepsie, and I can remember when I was growing up, my parents used to take me down to the river at what is now Warriors Park. And at the time, I couldn't really understand why they wanted to do that, because the river was, frankly, a stinking mess. It was not very pleasant, and it was very polluted. And in my lifetime, I've seen what citizen action can do, and I've seen what government action can do. The Department of Environmental Conservation has spent now billions of dollars. We're over the $1 billion mark in terms of expenditures to clean up water pollution in New York State. That's because the voters of New York have supported consistently bond acts to provide for the construction of sewage treatment plants and other actions to clean up the water. So I'm 35 years old, or I will be soon, and in my lifetime I've seen the river make a remarkable recovery.
From now through November 16th at Eisenhower Hall at West Point, artist Lori Feldman is displaying her collection of photographs of the Hudson River, but not one of them is in color.
I think the first factor was cost. I got $100 from my mom, and I had to make it go as far as I could make it go. But there's more to it than that. With black and white, you can do much more in the printing. At least I can. I have much more control, and I can handle the textures, technically handle the textures more than if I had color and I had to trust it to send it off to a lab. The other thing is, and it's very curious, my friends have told me that I see in black and white anyway. I went out on the river one day and shot a roll of color film, and it was black and white. There was hardly a color to be found in it. So I work very well with black and white. I feel very comfortable with it. This is Bear Mountain Sunset. It was taken at sunset from the top of Anthony's Nose. Anthony's Nose is one of my favorite places along the river. It rises up above the east side of the Bear Mountain Bridge. So we're looking west. This is the east side of the bridge, and this is the west side of the bridge. And it's an offshoot of the Appalachian Trail. And there's a very interesting story, and I may be spreading gossip. However, the story is that this peak became known as Anthony's Nose during the Civil War, when Civil War soldiers were running all over the place, and Anthony was up here, and he froze his nose off. And that's how this spot got to be called Anthony's Nose. This photograph is very real in the sense that I've tried very hard to bring you all of the patterns of the bridge. You can see all the wire work on the bridge, some of the texture of the water. This roadway over here is 9W going north. This over here is the Bear Mountain Traffic Circle, and this is Route 6 going west, and these are the mountains going on over west. On the other hand, this photograph here is a bit more abstract. It's a close-up of the water splashing on the rocks, and you can see the crest of this little wave, and you can see the rocks in the kind of muddy shoreline, but you can also look into this photograph and see anything you like. It's not real, and this leaves a lot to the viewer's imagination.
Lori says her father's love for the river inspired her so much that she dedicated her collection to him.
After the River Moods collection was assembled, this photo actually came at the very end because I determined that I wanted to dedicate the entire collection to my father. And so I made a photograph of him, and I initially went out with him on his boat, and we took some photographs, and they were interesting, but the boat moves a lot, and so the photos weren't very sharp. And then I thought, well, there's no point in giving Dad just a regular old picture in the exhibit. I have to do something special for him. So I determined that the best thing I could do would be to make a life-size photo, and actually this is almost life-size. And so I went down to one of his favorite fishing haunts early one morning and photographed him fishing. He certainly has taken me to all kinds of places on the river and introduced me to various marinas, and he's always had a boat, and he taught me how to swim, and so he's inspired me in my love for the river.
Lori is a lifelong resident of the Hudson River Valley.
I spent my entire childhood in Ossining, New York, on the river. Dad had a boat from 1963 onward, and he started with a speedboat, and then he had a very large cabin cruiser in the days when we were all wealthy and had a lot of gas to burn in the 1960s. And now he's got a little fishing boat that he uses, and he's always had a boat on the river.
According to Lori, fascination and intrigue are what sparked her interest with the Hudson.
In 1976, I was ill, and I spent a great deal of time doing a great deal of nothing. And when I started to work again, I was working in New York City, and I was commuting, and I was riding Conrail, it was then, the trains down from Ossining to Grand Central. And I used to sit there and look out the window at the river. And I thought that I wanted to do something photographic, and I'd been looking at the river for a long time, and I managed to get some money from my mother. She gave me $100, and I went out and I started to photograph the river. And at the time, I had a commuter pass from Ossining to Grand Central, and so I used to take a train and jump off at one of the stops down there at Ardsley or Hastings or Yonkers, and I'd walk along between the stations, walk along the river, and then when I got tired, I could just jump back on the train and come home. So that was how River Moods started. That was the photography aspect. Actually, the project evolved in 3 steps, I would say. The first was thinking about it, and I thought about it for about 15 years. And then the photography I did mostly in a period of 7 or 8 years. And then printing the exhibit was another, and the third aspect of it that was what I had not realized at the time, the big work. And I spent a great deal of time and energy making the prints that went into this show.
The late Ansel Adams, a world-renowned artist, also played an important role in influencing Lori's artwork.
I would say that I prescribe to the school of Ansel Adams. And I've read every word that Ansel Adams has ever published. I've spent endless hours gazing at his photographs. I've admired him incredibly. He also has done a great deal of outdoor nature shots, mostly in California, and Yosemite is one of his famous areas. But I love Ansel, and Ansel is very real. I'm not into photo collages, and I'm not into abstracts. I'm going after reality. But then Ansel teaches how to visualize reality so that you can make it more real if you believe it.
As a photographer of the Hudson, Lori believes the river's changing for the better.
The river is cleaner than it was 20 years ago. It doesn't smell quite so much when the tide goes out. Fish life is richer. We have fish coming up from the harbor, and we see that the fish that the men are catching in the river are bigger and healthier. And I think that in the 1960s, before ecology became a household word, that the river really did suffer. There was a lot of dumping, and I don't only mean industrial dumping, but just people who loved the river, people who had boats on the river, would throw garbage in the river. And they didn't mean it to be malicious. They didn't mean to pollute the river. Nobody thought they were polluted. They were just thoughtless. They were ignorant. And I think since the late 60s, ecology has become much more of a factor, and the people who use the river are much more careful and much more loving with it, and tend to fish the garbage out as opposed to throw the garbage in. So I think it's become cleaner.
Now let's meet some of Laurie's people and go to some of her places.
This is Louis, and Louis goes fishing every morning. He goes and he sits on his favorite spot over here on the side of the river, and he likes to fish, and he goes down about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he fishes until about 7, and then he has breakfast and he goes to work. And Louis likes to feed the cats. When Louis comes down, all the cats come out and they wait for him. And this particular cat is the mother, and she likes to sit right near Louis, and she watches the bobber on his fishing line. And when she sees the bobber bob, she begins to lick her chops and get her paws ready, because she knows that Louis is going to pull in a fish. And he takes the fish right off the line and puts it on the ground and feeds it to the cat. And the cat picks it up and calls all her little kitties to come around, and all the cats eat the fish, and they all sit there and wait for Louis to fish. And that's why he goes. He has a responsibility. He's got an entire cat colony down by the riverside. This is in Ossining, New York, at Salazzo's Marina. This wreck was on the east bank of the Hudson River, somewhere near Hastings, and I was walking along the riverside, and I was actually walking from the south going north, and I was walking along, and I walked past this boat, and I looked at it, and I checked it out, and I walked all around it and everything, and I didn't photograph it. And it wasn't until I walked past it to the north and turned back around and looked at it that I saw the photo that I wanted to take. Unfortunately, this negative was damaged when it was processed and in the handling, and so getting this quality print out of the damaged negative was a bit of a trick, but I think I learned something from it. Technically, this print was made with 4 different exposures to burn in the water and hold back the sky and burn this in so it's a tight line down here. But I really like the way that the light comes off of the top of the boat, and I also like the way this line goes out to the corner of the photograph. It's become quite a popular photograph, and it grows on you. I like it.
Laurie admits even though the majority of her shots are taken in the summertime, she prefers the winter scenes of the river.
I find that my better shots are taken in the winter, and the reason is in the summertime there's just too much light. The light is so bright and there's so much glare from the river that you can see something with your naked eye, and to capture it on film is much more difficult because of all the ultraviolet. But in the wintertime, it's perhaps easier to get the images that you're going after because the light is lower and softer.
This is Laurie's most recent photo, shot in 1984. It's called Sunset over New Jersey.
It was shot from the west side of Manhattan at 82nd Street in Riverside Park, looking west at New Jersey. And the river there is actually kind of uninteresting. It smells, and there's not a lot happening because people don't go swimming there or do too much recreation on it. It's really a working river at that point, although there is a 79th Street boat basin where people live. But it's a beautiful place to take a walk by the riverside. And so one evening I photographed sunset over New Jersey, and I decided to put some stars. As the lights on the building came out, I determined that a star filter would enhance it. And so, indeed, I used a star filter, and that's how you get this spidery effect off of the lights. And I find that people who look at the photograph like that. They enjoy that.
Laurie says she would like to expand her 36 photo exhibit.
Basically, I've stayed south. This collection is from New York City to the Newburgh Beacon Bridge, and I really haven't photographed north of there. But I've thought about my next project in terms of making pictures, and I think that what I would like to do to contrast the southern end of the river is to go north to the source of the river, high in the Adirondacks and north of Albany, and see where the river actually begins. So I think that's going to be my next trip.
As we view Laurie's photos like a story being told, we find there's a main theme that flows throughout the collection.
I'm telling a story that the river is beautiful. I'm telling a story about it being a place of recreation, and it's a working river. We've seen the tugs and the sinking ship, and we've also seen the fishermen and the boats. And there's a lot happening on this river, and it's alive. And I think that people need to be made aware of it and to care for it and treat it as though it's alive.
It is alive for sure, and with Laurie Feldman around to document it through her lenses, the river flows its two-way course regardless of color or black and white film. Thanks for coming aboard. We'll be back next week, right here on the river. On the River is brought to you by Freihofer's.
For a VHS copy of this program, please write On the River, P.O. Box 1609, Kingston, New York 12401. Please include a check for $35 made out to WTZA-TV and the date of this program.